An interaction of potential equals a distinction. The distinction expresses the potential by identifying its relationship to the potential, so that it operates in addition to the potential. Earlier fundamental identification is the process of stabilization, or at least achieved through stabilization. Stabilization is what happens when a distinction can identify the operation of itself or for itself, so that it is said to be about a system of itself. The term stabilization is then representing interaction on its behalf. To have this relationship is one of the main reasons why there is a cause and effect possibility in the first place. Interaction becomes specified to each system so that the distinction is greater or the identity increases because the information is more effective. This additional operation means the identity of the distinction can be described as having interaction on its behalf. The additional operation can be minimally defined as the distinction made and nothing more, but we generally mean a stable state of interaction so that there is an obvious identity about it which can support a specified operation. Therefore, the minimum distinction needed for an identity is its relationship to its potential, which we should be able to represent as the results of the interaction that will support the distinction. The fundamental result is always the two-split, where all natures for it are defined by the potential and all natures of it are expressing the potential. The expressive state gains the operation of its requirements, which is now the system of the identity of the distinction. Yes, this means that in order to exist there must be an interaction, and if something is said to exist, then it must also be defined as interacting. The identity of this is locked in so that there will always be identification for interaction, since the nature that makes interaction possible is the potential state's distinction of itself, which we describe as an absolute relationship rather than an interaction, but we understand that this relationship is interaction for an expressive state of the potential. Therefore, all distinctions of the potential state will reflect the absolute relation of the potential state. This is what codes existence. In this sense, interaction represents the two-split for every distinction of the potential state. For us, the absolute side describes an indefinite position that we can identify by distinguishing the relationship of it. Interaction is this identification process, and the information distinguished is the stability for it or the stabilization of it. Interactions quantify relationships for the potential involved in the distinction. This allows distinctions to be expressive states of the potential. Expressive states have a nature of identification that is represented by systems of operation. Usually, if there is a system of operation, then there is an identity of self or an actualized state. In this case, an actualized state simply means an identity with exclusive-like relationships, and an identity of self means a recognition of its operation for distinction. The minimum system of operation needed for an identity is the interaction of itself, which would consist of the identification of it and that which makes it possible. If there is this kind of interaction, then there is a distinction of the potential, so that the identity of the distinction is understood to operate additionally to the potential. This additional operation is a quantification of the potential so that the distinction it makes is the system of itself, which is obviously the interaction required, while naturally the relationship becomes more specified. What is critical about this is the potential for complex relationships between a system operation and interaction. Fundamentally, this complex relationship would allow system operations to influence the interaction just as much as the interaction determined the distinction, since the interaction is what makes any specified operation possible in the first place. This supports the idea that the environment or condition you'll get is the only environment or condition possible. Existence is always the state of itself, which is always at least the potential for itself. The fundamental nature of existence is the nature for existence, so that in order for there to be the possibility, there already has to be the possibility. This creates an absolute condition for potential. The potential has no choice but to identify this condition as the relationship of itself, since there is no potential without this relationship. This absolute identification allows distinctions of the potential in the form of interaction. The expressive state of a potential allows an identity to develop for the interaction and distinction. This identity represents the operation of a distinction, so that it is said to have a system of itself. A system of itself allows it to stabilize the distinction between it and that which makes it possible. The system of itself is said to operate in addition to the potential, while the results of its operation will always express the potential. Since all results are expressions of the potential, all distinctions identify the potential. The point of existence is to identify. and the way you identify is by existing.